All right, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to the Lalytics webinar, Introduction to Content Creation. My name is Dan Jaffe. I'm an attorney and I'm the CEO of Lalytics. Joining me today will be Victoria Blute, who is our community manager. Victoria will be presenting the first half of this webinar, and then I'll be jumping in with the second half. With that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Victoria.
Great, thanks, Dan. Good morning, everybody, and afternoon to our East Coast viewers. My name is Victoria Blute, and I'm the community manager here at Lalytics. To give you a little introduction about myself, if you're not familiar with me, my job is to keep Lalytics and attorneys up to date on the newest developments with search engines and social media and more, so that attorneys feel comfortable taking control of their web presence and have the know-how to do that. We always like to have law firms take away a point in our webinar early on, and that is that if you want to, you really have the power to control your firm's marketing. And by taking the time, like on the web, and to take the time to learn what's valuable to your web presence and how you can reach the right audience, law firms who do this are really putting themselves at an advantage over those who either leave these things to chance or up to somebody else. So without any further ado, let's take a look at what we're going to talk about today. Here's a little summary of what we're going to be discussing during this presentation. Firstly, I'll quickly go over why content matters for law firms and what defines the high-quality content that attorneys will want to be writing for their law firm's blog or website. When we're done there, we're going to get into a number of ways that you can present your content. A good way not only to inspire you to write unique content for the web, but also to give you some fresh ideas to present that content that will engage your readers and potential clients. Lastly, I'll talk about what any writer dreads, and that is writer's block. The causes of writer's block are varied, but I'll provide you with some tips and tricks to help get yourself writing if you've hit a snag. After that, Dan's going to jump back in to discuss some of the mechanics of content creation, and that will include writing conventions for the web, content hierarchy, branding, and more. So let's look at why content matters. Content matters, and that's quality content, because it's the element that makes search engines, search engine users, and referral sources happy. We'll talk a little bit about what comprises quality content in a second, but first, let's talk about why content matters for these three groups. Search engines want quality content. It's the reason why search engines exist in the first place. Google's mission from day one has been to organize the world's information and to provide its users with the best answers to the questions that they have in the form of web pages and websites as search results. Google spends its time crawling the web for new material to index and then retrieve when somebody makes a related search. Google's bots are on the lookout for new content on the web, and they have lots of algorithms in place to ensure that the content that they index is really good. Google has an interest in giving search engine users what they're looking for. After all, no one would use Google if it wasn't actually a useful tool in answering questions and helping people make decisions about where they'll go, what they'll do, or what brands they'll choose. Which brings me to the next bullet point. Content matters because it's what search engine users want. Search engine users want quality content because more and more people are consulting a search engine for research, in fact. They're using search engines more than ever before to make decisions about purchases, and that can be from anything to which restaurant they'll choose, to which products they'll buy, to which services they'll purchase. And a recent statistic says that more than 80% of online shoppers do research before they buy something, and that's a fact that should have attorneys' ears perked up. People look at reviews, they compare things, they ask search engines all sorts of questions for which the engine attempts to provide the most relevant answers. So by giving users what they want, detailed information that answers their questions, attorneys put their firm in a better position to engage with potential clients on the web. Lastly, referral sources want high-quality content too. It's important to note that where all of these points are concerned, there's really been a change in the way that we process information as a culture. It used to be that, as a culture, we paid for information. That was really the time before the internet. Now, however, we're moving from an information economy, a time where we pay for information, to an information society, and that is a culture that no longer pays for information. Information societies are defined by civilizations that rely on the creation and distribution and use of information rather than relying on information as their most valuable money-making material, something that needs to be hoarded and protected at all costs. And that means, as a last point about why content matters, and now that you know how valuable it is to the important components of helping to support and build your business, content not only matters because these sources want it, but also because if you're not writing content, somebody else will be. It's sort of one of the reasons that the internet can be a scary place. Anyone with internet access and a keyboard has the ability to look authoritative, and the internet can give the illusion of authority where there is little. And that means there's the potential for attorneys who may not be at the top of their game to blog misleading or inaccurate information to their readership. So that's why it's so important for you to be writing content. It can help to secure your reputation and your credibility, and by offering up meaningful content that encourages potential clients to not only educate themselves, but to seek your particular brand of counsel, you'll be putting your law firm in a really good position. So now that we've covered why content matters, let's talk about what makes high-quality content. So there are 4 features of content that make that to be high quality, something that people can use to make decisions and to make purchase choices. So if you ask yourself anything, these are the 4 things that we want to look at. Firstly, is your content significant? You want to ask yourself how relevant the content is to potential clients. Relevant content will add something of value to the conversation, something that people haven't seen before. It makes your clients feel that you understand what they're looking for, and that may make them more likely to engage with your firm. When Google users type in a query, Google wants to give them back results that, as much as possible, answer their questions. So it's important to know what kinds of questions your clients are asking. And it's worth noting here that clients won't just type in some search keywords. They're really asking questions to Google. So you'll want to find ways to address those questions through your content. Thinking ahead about what clients are asking and making sure that your content addresses that in conjunction with Google's bots finding your website puts your site in a position to be highly relevant for the specific questions that search engine users are asking. Secondly, you'll want to ask yourself, is your content unique? So having unique content is not only a chance to add something of value to the conversation, but I think it also shows potential clients that your content is really one of a kind. It's yours. It's your brand. This is definitely an area not to skimp on. If you tuned in with us yesterday as we talked about dangerous web practices that can sink your firm, we talked a little bit about duplicate content and scraped content. And on that note, nobody likes a plagiarist, and that includes Google. They've been very specific in saying that duplicate content in one part of your site can hurt the site altogether. You really want to make sure that content is your own. Third, we have insightful content. What new pieces of information does your content add to the overall conversation? The goal here is to have readers walk away with the sense that they've really learned something new from reading what you specifically have to say. So whether that's something that they didn't know about the law or thought they did, and you've given them a better education about what they really need to understand, the content that you write should be intelligent and offer readers something profound. So again, another reason to make sure that you're writing your own content. Again, if you want to cite another source, go for it, but the analysis there needs to be your own. And lastly, we look at the trustworthiness of content. So users tend to have true feelings about content. They tend to feel better about brands that blog on a regular basis. And there are a lot of components to trustworthiness: the accuracy of the information that's provided, the expertise of the person who's providing it, how in-depth the material is, among other things. But we want to make sure that readers can really rely on what it is that you're telling them. So now that we know why content matters and what makes quality content, how do we present it to readers in a way that's going to engage them? Let's talk a little bit about content presentation. So here's a quick summary of some of the post types that we're going to talk about. If you note that little asterisk there, I've made a point to say that for any of these content presentation types, the goal should be to create reads that aren't too lengthy, that are easily digested by readers of varying education levels, and that the content itself is educational. So we'll talk first about question and answer sessions. So in these blogs, you can either write and answer commonly asked questions yourself, or write hypotheticals, or encourage your subscribers to contact you with questions they have about your area of practice. This post type really gets down to what potential clients are looking for in the most obvious way, directly answering those questions. And this is an opportunity for attorneys to not only write and answer questions that they often hear from potential clients, but also to think up and answer the kinds of questions that potential clients aren't asking but maybe should be. Here we have success and inspirational stories. This is a nice way to incorporate the truly human aspects of your practice into your law firm's website or blog. Maybe you have a recent court win that you're really excited about sharing with your readership, or you've heard a story that inspired you and you think it'll move your readers too. Blogging about either of these is a great way to reach people and to have them understand why being an attorney really matters to you. I often hear Dan use the expression that people won't care about what you know until they know how much you care, and I think that is a valuable thing to keep in mind. If potential clients don't know why being an attorney really matters to you, it can be difficult for them to accept why they should listen to you and care about what you have to say and trust you and ultimately hire your firm over another. While technology is sort of front and center now in business, people still want to have meaningful experiences with other people. And so by writing this sort of content, you have a chance to connect with potential clients in a way that helps to inform them about how much you really care about what you do. Case studies. So this is a good way to engage your readers by putting them in a position to understand broader concepts about the law and how the law applies to various cases by examining a single case at a time. So here you can lay out the conditions surrounding the problem and then how it was resolved. Additionally, educating readers about cases that involve landmark decisions can be particularly interesting in that they establish new legal principles or change how we interpret the law. So vocabulary enrichment and debunking myths. These are two great post ideas for a number of reasons. The first one we'll talk about is vocabulary enrichment. This is an easy blog to write that your audience will really appreciate. Think about writing a blog that offers up, say, a legal term of the day. You can educate your readers on jargon that's likely confusing or off-putting to them. Defining these in layman's terms is really helpful. You can use them in a sentence, find a practical example to show readers how they're used in the legal world. These blogs will be easy for you to write and they're fun for your audience to read. Secondly is debunking myths. So not only can a post like this provide informative, thought-provoking content, and it serves as a nice opportunity to use a numbered list, or what we call a listicle. Say, quote, 5 things you think you know about, ... those sorts of lists. But also, this sort of content is highly shareable and may generate a lot of discussions and questions. There's a good chance that some of the content you write here will be shared on things like social media, because when people are provided with unusual or shocking facts, they may share them even if they're totally off the mark. If you spend any amount of time on social media, you've surely come across some things presented as facts inside of a meme or a pretty picture, even if they are totally so far from reality. People really enjoy sharing those sorts of things for some reason. So we could get into the complex nature of how social media affects things like confirmation bias, but basically this time you have an opportunity to provide actual facts. So you may want to make use of that style. So regardless of the type of law you practice, you can likely generate between 5 and 10 common myths about your particular practice area, or common myths about the law in general. If you're feeling short on ideas, you may want to send an email to your clients asking them about things that they've heard about your particular type of law, questions that they have, and they'd like to see answered. This is really a way to interact with your audience and have them participate with your blog in a meaningful way. Also, giving your readers a heads up that you'll be writing such an article may generate interest in the blog before it's even published. So now that we've talked about some of the fun parts of writing content, let's talk about the least fun part of writing, which is what happens if you've gotten yourself into a creativity rut. Dreaded writer's block. So writer's block happens for all kinds of reasons, and regardless of whether it's full-time professional writers, college students, people who write for the sheer enjoyment of writing, I have yet to meet anyone who has not at some point come up against writer's block. It feels awful. However, I am here to tell you there are plenty of good ways to get yourself out of it. I recently read an article about willpower that kind of struck me. It said that people with low willpower use it to get themselves out of crises. People with high willpower use it to stop themselves from getting into crises in the first place. And this first suggestion has willpower written all over it. I think one of the best things that you can do to avoid writer's block is to go into a writing session truly prepared. What do I mean when I say that you're prepared? I mean that you have A, carved out a specific amount of time that you're going to write. B, you show up with a ready workspace and you have an idea ready to go. And C, if you want to go even one step further, taking 5 minutes to do a quick outline of what you'll write beforehand can really be helpful. It can really help to expedite the process and give you a clear idea of where you're headed so you don't get halfway through a piece and wonder to yourself how you're going to finish it. Preparation tends to eliminate a lot of the panic and frustration I associate with writer's block, and willpower is like a muscle. You use it, it gets stronger, you get better at the task that you needed the willpower for. And writing content is sort of that way. Next up, you'll want to deal with distractions, and that's both good and bad. If you've been staring at a blank page for 10 minutes, one method that I like is getting up from your desk and going to do something else. Honestly, distract yourself. Take a walk, go get a snack, have a drink of water, go have a conversation with someone, anything that's not writing related. I often find that by doing this, I feel refreshed and I can sit down and really finish what I've started. As for bad distractions, those can also be a source of writer's block. In the digital age, multitasking can be very tempting to do, but it's also really bad for your productivity. If you're answering emails, texts, phone calls, spending time on social media while you're trying to write, you're going to have a hard time getting it done in the time that you've allotted for yourself. And you'll be distracting yourself instead of focusing on writing that high-quality content that's really going to help your law firm. So when you've devoted the time to writing, really spend that time just writing. Read something. So you may also want to try reading something, whether it's content related or not. So the newspaper, a chapter of a book, even other legal blogs that you can pull inspiration from. The next tip is the one that makes me cringe, and it is to write anyway. It makes me cringe because I think I tend to be a perfectionist, and I'm sure many of you out there can relate to this. And that makes this tip hard to follow. I recommend doing it. What I mean when I say write anyway is just to go for it. What you're writing does not have to be perfect in round one. You can always do the editing later. But by getting those ideas down, even if they're not organized just the way you'd like them, you can still help to kickstart your writing if you're struggling to write content. Another aspect of writing content anyway is writing your content out of order. If I'm in a rut, it is not unusual to see me write the end of a piece first and then write the beginning, or discover that as I'm writing, the paragraph in the middle of my content is really where I wanted to start. So experiment with that and see what it does for your writing. And the last tip is to stick to your writing schedule. I have heard it put that there is never going to be the perfect moment for you to do something. You can't just wait around until you sort of feel like doing it. The trick is to do it. And the more content you write, the better you'll get at it and the easier it will become for you. And in some cases, there are attorneys who really enjoy the content writing process. So stick to it. You may find that you're one of them. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dan, who's going to discuss some of the mechanical aspects of content creation to make sure that what you're writing is optimally presented to search engines and your potential clients. Dan?
Thanks, Tori. Let me get my screen shared here in just a moment. And can you see my screen now?
Oops, I can, Dan.
Okay, great. All right. Well, let me find my mouse. Okay. What I want to do is start out with some housekeeping matters because we didn't address them at the beginning of the webinar, and we've gotten a couple questions in the meantime. This webinar is being recorded, and it may be especially poignant for this next section that I'm going to be presented because we're going to be going over a lot of details very quickly. And so there's no need to take notes. You'll be provided with both the audio and video recording as well as the slide deck and notes and so forth. And that will usually be available within a couple days after the webinar is over. At the conclusion of this segment, which I anticipate will last somewhere between 20 minutes and maybe a half an hour or so, we'll open it up for questions. If you have questions that come up while I'm presenting, go ahead and put them in either the chat area or the questions area of the GoToWebinar control panel, and we'll take a look at them as soon as the presentation is over. Let's go ahead and, oops. When we talk about writing for the web, there used to be a dichotomy. Are you writing for the machines, for the computers such as Google, Yahoo, Bing, other search engines, and so forth? Or are you writing for human beings? Because those two things used to be very different. The good news is that they are completely merged. Man and machine have, in fact, become one when it comes to writing for your audience online. This segment of the webinar that I'm going to be presenting is maybe a step up in excitement from learning how to use the Blue Book during law school. And I remember that it was very difficult for me to stay awake during that presentation all those years ago. But this is foundationally important, and so try to stick with me. And I'm going to be going through a lot of things. Let's start out with the conceptual adjustments that you need to make for writing for the web versus traditional writing, whether that's writing prose, whether that's writing an email, whether it's writing a letter, or whether it's writing a legal document. And obviously there's different standards for all of those. Writing for the web has its own standard as well. The biggest adjustment that attorneys need to make is that while there is a fold, so to speak, on the website, there is no paper. So think about the space on your website as a newspaper. And in the newspaper, where you have the fold, everything above the fold was typically considered to be more important or more relevant than what was below the fold because the eyes would see it first. When you're looking at a website, the fold differs from viewer to viewer because people view it in different screen sizes using different browsers, different devices, and so forth. For the purposes of this discussion, I'm going to be switching back and forth between various tabs. What I'm going to do is show you the sample site that we're going to be using, which just has filler content. And when I talk about the fold, what I'm saying is anything from where my mouse is here at the bottom of the screen that you can currently see up. So basically what the user sees when they first log in. As I scroll, anything that then comes into view is considered to be below the fold. On a smaller screen, it may only go a paragraph or two. On a larger screen, you may see several more paragraphs. When you think about the space on a website, understand that the space on the page is unlimited, and so you're not constrained by page limits. You're not constrained by having to fit anything in other than what you think the reader's attention span might be. And as you're thinking about how to order things on your pages, there's more chaos to this because there is no set reading order, not on a page, not on a website. So what I mean by that is people enter your website through a variety of different means, and when we look at the statistics across a wide spectrum of attorney websites, it's very clear that those people who become potential clients usually don't come in through the law firm's website's homepage. In other words, they're searching for something specific. They're finding that search result and they're going directly to that page. So when you introduce a topic on a web page, you want to assume that any reader that is looking at that may not have read any page above it or below it in your website's navigation hierarchy. And so you want to make sure that they have not only enough context to understand and appreciate what you're writing, but also the context that you're a law firm, that you are contactable, and so forth. So all that needs to be within the confines of each and every page. And on the web versus traditional writing, there are a lot more distractions. What that means is that you have to capture the user's attention or the reader's attention very rapidly. We're going to get into ways to do that. Let's talk a little bit about style conventions for the web, because when you go from being used to writing briefs or letters or even emails, there are some differences that do make a difference. So when we look at these nuances, make sure that when you're writing individual paragraphs, you don't indent them on the web. That just creates blank space. So you'll notice that each of these paragraphs are not indented. And we're going to be working with this content in the context of the Lalytic control panel. And this is an example of what this looks like in the Lalytic control panel. And we're going to put some styles on this page as we go forward. But the first thing that I want you to notice is that there are no indentations. Next thing is when you look at the individual paragraphs, which this is all just filler text, so we didn't write anything that makes sense. That's for a reason. It's just there for demonstration purposes. When you get to the end of each sentence, typically, at least the way I was taught to write, I would hit the space bar 2 times so that there were 2 spaces between the period that ended one sentence and the capital letter that started the next sentence. When you're writing for the web, that's different. Only do 1 space in between the sentences. There is almost compulsion that we've noticed amongst attorneys who start writing their own content for the web for the first time to overuse things like bold, italics, underline, and all capital letters. I want to caution you against that. These things are available for emphasis, but you want to make sure that you don't overdo things. So, for example, we'll go into attorneys' websites as we're counseling them on how to improve their pages, and we'll see whole paragraphs underlined or titles in all capital letters. These things are not only off-putting to your human users, they can cause problems with the search engines as well. So you want to write in a way that's understated. And if you're writing something that is of value, which is really the most important thing, you're adding to the conversation, you're demonstrating that you're a thought leader by educating your readers about something that they care about. There is really no need to use these and other things such as highlighting and so forth to set off the text. One thing that we see a lot also that I want to caution you against is to use contrasting colors on your website. So, for example, if you have a site that has a light gray background, you don't want to use a gray font that provides very little contrast. You want to make it easy to read. You want to assume that people are going to be coming in not only on a desktop, but on a tablet, on a cell phone, in various lighting conditions with various levels of vision, acuity, and so forth. And so the more contrast you can provide to help them read it, the better, within some limits. But so you want to make sure that you don't purposely use colors that blend in too much, and don't hide text. And this goes more into one of the points that Tori made in yesterday's video about practices that can sync your online marketing, which is to hide text, whether it's behind objects on your web page, whether it's you putting white text on white background so it's not visible, whatever the case. You want to think about your readers at all times, because not only will it make them feel better about what they're reading and interacting with on your site, which they really attribute to you as your virtual office and their first impression of you in many cases. But it's also very important to the search engines as well that you don't have hidden text and so forth on the page. Now, when we look at constructing the content that we're going to put on our site, the question often comes up: how should the content be structured in terms of pages? Should we put multiple things on a page? And the best practice that we've found is to make each page very specific. Pick one main thesis. There can be multiple subtopics under that per piece. And you want to make sure that you provide explicit subject guideposts, and we'll get more into that in a couple of minutes, that are consistent with the thesis of that page, including the page title, the HTML title, and the headers, which we'll address shortly. Your website doesn't, or your web pages don't exist in a bubble, and your website is never going to be read from front to center, or from front to end rather. But say they come in the center somewhere, and they're looking at your content, and they are resonating with what you have written. There's a good chance that they may go up a level in your navigation. There's a good chance that they may go down a level. There's a good chance that they're going to click on internal links that you have to other areas of content on your site. And so you want to make sure that when you have hierarchy in your pages, that the pages above and below the page that you're working on support what's on that page. Obviously, it's not going to be identical, but it should be at least related in a way that you can segue from one page to another. A lot of attorneys want to make sure that they have their branding on every page. For example, we see attorneys who write blog posts, and then at the end of the blog post, they have basically the same paragraph, something to the effect of, hey, we do what we just talked about in this blog post very well. And if you're facing the problem that we discussed in this blog post, you would be well advised to contact us, and so forth. Those types of things do have their place depending on the context, but more and more users are sophisticated, and they understand if they're at your website and your website is branded to your firm, it's got your logo at the top, it's got your phone number, it's got a button that says contact us, it's got your address on there, they understand that the purpose of the website is not only to share information, but to invite you and them to connect. And so you don't need to force the issue, because sometimes by saying it too much, it diminishes the effect of what you are creating in connecting with them through your content. When we talk about the HTML titles that we'll be getting into in just a moment, it will make more sense. But when you are constructing your HTML titles, it is appropriate to, at times, append your law firm's name or branding to those titles. Let's talk about page titles first, though, and then we'll get into the HTML titles as well. The page title is basically the top concept on the page. It's, in this example page, it's what we have up here. This is what it looks like in the Lalytic control panel. And you can make this whatever you want it to be, but what you want to really make sure of is that it embodies what you want the reader to know. Think of it like a newspaper, where if the reader sees the headline, they're going to read down. And if they don't like what they see in the headline, they're probably going to flip to the next article or just move on. You've got mere seconds once the page is loaded to catch them with your page title. And so you want to make sure that it matches what you think the page is about, and that you make it easy for them to find it. You want to think about what keywords or phrases people might be searching for. In other words, what questions are they asking Google and the other search engines? And you want to try to include those words or variations of those words in your page title. HTML titles. Let me show you the difference between the page title and the HTML title. In the Lalytic control panel, the title of the page goes up here, and the HTML title goes in the title tag area. The purpose of this title tag, and we'll get to the meta description in a moment, but the purpose of the HTML title tag is to give Google and the other search engines guidance on what to display. So in this case, we typed in California criminal defense, and here's an example of a Lalytic site that has come up. This is the title, the HTML title that gets displayed. Google will look at what you have there and will oftentimes display it. And so you want to make sure that HTML title is consistent with what you think your users are going to search for and then resonate with on that page. As far as the length of it, shoot for around 70 characters or so. When you're using Lalytics, if you choose to just type in your page title and leave this title tag area blank, Lalytics will append your firm's name or whatever you've put in the firm name area of the control panel, which is beyond the scope of this webinar, to this. So in other words, it will say, this is a sample title tag, for example, or a sample title, which is exactly what we have up here. And then it will put in a pipe symbol and then your law firm's name. And so for pages where you have a shorter title, that may very well be appropriate. For pages where you want to really focus the potential reader on something that educates them more than something that's about your firm, then you'll want to use the title tag area and put in a specific custom title tag. Meta keywords. In a nutshell, don't use them. There used to be a reason to have a meta keyword field, which is basically a field that has a bunch of words stuffed into it at the top of your website that only the search engines can see, and it's invisible to the human users unless they reveal the machine language source of your web page. The search engines stopped paying attention to those a long time ago. And there's no danger in using them if you're still using them well, if the keywords that you put into them match up with the thesis of your page and the content that's on your page. But because there's no tangible benefit, there's really no reason to spend the effort in creating them. And what I want to caution you against is if you have somebody that's writing content for you, and they are creating meta keywords and meta keyword fields for you, if they're stuffing the meta keywords with spammy type keywords, or the keywords are unrelated to what's on the page, we believe that can still send a signal that your website is trying to be manipulative with the search engines, which can cause trouble. And so, in our estimation, the best practices with meta keywords is basically to not practice anything, to just ignore them. Give me just a moment here. I believe that I inadvertently left out the meta description slide. And so before we move on to headings, let's take a look at the meta description area. In the Lalytic control panel, this is where you put the meta description. The meta description is simply a description of what's going to be on the page that you put on your website as a suggestion to the search engines for them to display for your human users. So for example, in this example, if Google chose to use the meta description, this is where it would be displayed. Sometimes Google uses the meta description that you put in there. Sometimes they will simply take text from the body of the web page that they're displaying the result for. You really don't have control over that, but it is a good practice to go ahead and put in the meta description there if you have the time to do it. It's in the hierarchy of things that should be done. It's very much subordinate to writing good content, but want to make you aware that that is there. Now, in terms of headings, think about headings as that Emmanuel's law outline that you had during law school. I think they call it a Harvard-style outline, where you've got your main thesis, and then under it you've got your nested child topic, and then nesting cascades, so forth below there. This is a convention that's been around on the web for a long time. And when you look at a Lalytics powered page, for example, the headline on your page is always a primary or a first level heading. Let me show you just briefly what that looks like in HTML. This is not something that you ever need to worry about unless you are coding your own page. But for the purposes of this, I think it makes sense to show you what it looks like under the hood. So when we talk about a top level heading, HTML basically uses the H1 convention, and it basically nests whatever the content you want to be your H1 within these brackets. So this is an opening and this is a closing. And Lalytics puts that in for you automatically for the title, so you don't have to worry about that. So this is how the cascade goes, and we'll take a look at actually doing it on a page in a moment. When it comes to your headings, you want to make sure that each heading is unique. And let's actually take a look here. So right now we have a page with the top level heading, and then I've put some secondary and third level headings in there, but I haven't actually applied the heading styles to them yet. So we're going to look back at the sample page. We're going to go up to the top here. We know that this is already the first heading. Let's go ahead and highlight this, and it's as easy as going to the Formats menu and applying the second heading to this. And then we're going to, so the way I like to do it is you've got your title, and then you've got maybe a little intro paragraph. Then you've got a second heading that introduces a main thesis on the page. You've got some text to support that, introducing it. And then you've got your subtopics. So we'll turn that into a third level heading. Then we've got more filler text in the paragraphs in between. Then here's another third level heading, because we can have multiple third level headings nested under a second heading. So we'll do that. And then under this third level heading, we're going to go ahead and nest a fourth level. And then we'll do another fourth level under that. And then say we want to go up the ladder again, we'll put another third level heading under here, and you get the idea. You can go on forever with these. And when we style this, now let's go ahead and refresh this page. We'll see that this adds in these delineations. And what this does is it not only makes it more digestible for your human users, it also tells the search engines what is most important in terms of the topic. And so what the search engines are going to do is look look under each heading and see whether the text supports the heading. And so you want to try to make the text that you put under the heading very consistent with the heading. There's some practices to avoid. You don't want to use these headings to apply styles unless it also happens to work in the context of the content that you have on there. So in other words, say you decided, oh, I really want this paragraph down here to be this text size. Let me go ahead and highlight this whole paragraph and apply a third level heading to it, or second level heading, whatever that was. You don't want to do that. What that does is it sends mixed messages. You don't want to have whole paragraphs highlighted with that. And you don't want to stuff these various headings with keywords. So in other words, if you say something like, personal injury, or how personal injury lawyers charge for their services, period. You would not want to say how personal injury lawyers and attorneys charge for the services, or how personal injury lawyers and personal injury attorneys charge for their services. One pass at it, using one way of saying it, is sufficient, and anything beyond that tends to not only distract the human readers, but get to the point where it may be in the danger zone as far as the search engines go. The content on your page, and what I'm talking about here is, well, all of this is content, as well as videos, pictures, maps, anything else that you want to put in. But the most important thing really comes down to the substantive content that you have between the headers, because that's going to reinforce what your headers are saying. And the written words are still so much more important than anything else that you add in terms of these search engines. You want to use things like videos, pictures, maps, forms, various Lalytics widgets such as case results, attorney profiles, link groups, stuff like that. You want to use those things as supplementary to that main substantive content. When you're writing your substantive content, don't feel constrained by word count. So you might see guidelines where this article needs to be 300 words or 1,000 words or whatever, because you really want to think about your end user. The better way of looking at it is to simply convey all of the information that you want that user to have. And as long as that information has been conveyed, it doesn't matter how long or how short it is, it's going to serve its purpose. And you have to think about the human users first. So in other words, don't add additional words just to pump up the word count, and don't prune words to make it shorter to fit into some preconceived notion of how long pages need to be. And understand on the web that your visitors are not necessarily going to read everything that you write. In fact, they may only read a paragraph of a 2,000-word article that you wrote. But if that paragraph conveys the information that they want, and they either go on to another page of your website, or they understand that you can supply them with the services that they need, or they've put you kind of on a list to come back to, or whatever, that content has done its job. And since it's going to be different for every person, just like different things resonate with different jurors, you want to make sure that you cover the spectrum, and don't worry about it being too long, didn't read. Finally, when it comes to links on your website, we're not going to go into the mechanics of linking at all in this webinar. We'll be covering that more in depth in future webinars. But really, linking on the web has become the new citation. And so if you are writing a legal brief, you're going to cite to whatever appellate court or statute. You're going to use it in a certain format. Um, while it's okay to add those things into legal intensive content that you're writing about the substantive areas of law, or even in blog posts about new case law, new legislation, and so forth, understand that those citations mean nothing. So if they see, 586, P2D, whatever, that's going to not mean anything to most layman potential clients. And it's really not going to matter to lawyers who are reading it anyways, because uh, there's not anything that's actionable on there short of copying it and looking it up. So when you can, it makes sense to link out to resources. It also makes sense to link within your website to other things on your website that add to the user's experience in consuming the content that you've written on the article. It also makes sense to use Lalytic's link groups at times. And for those of you who either are not currently using Lalytics or who have not used that feature yet, that's a function of Lalytics where you can gather a group of links, say all the courts in a jurisdiction, or to all the say the local appellate courts, or whatever the case may be that's relevant to the article. And with a click, you can put it in as many places as you want within your Lalytics powered website, and adding, and it'll appear as a little box within the content rather than as an inline link, which would be something like if you were reading along and this was linked, this would be an inline link. And what I'm talking about would be like a box that would go on the side here that would say, local courts in San Diego, for example. And then we just have a list of them with the links. Things like that are very important to the user experience, because it especially when people have come in looking for information rather than looking specifically for an attorney, if you can be helpful to them in finding more information on the web. Now, you certainly don't want to specifically lead them to any of your competitors or to places where they may discover your competitors, but if you freely share information as in the form of links, it's appreciated. It's also good. It's good for building authority. It's good for establishing yourself as a thought leader. Links should also be used, and we'll get into this in a lot more detail when we do the blogging clinic in a couple weeks. But links can be used as a way of giving recognition or thanks or credit to somebody on whose ideas you've built whatever content that you're presenting in that case. And there's my other slide with all this information. So that's really it in terms of the basics. There's a lot more details that become more important as you get more advanced with writing your own content. But the important thing is, like Tori said, just get started. Just do it. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's not going to be perfect the first time, the second time, or even a year from now. But when you start publishing regularly and you start being less concerned with making it ideal or perfect, like you might a brief to the court, and more concerned about just communicating with other human beings who happen to be out there on the internet, you'll start, this will start to be a lot easier, and you'll start to see a lot of positive rewards from it in your practice. With that, I'm going to take a look at the questions. And Tori, have you seen questions that you're ready to present?
Let's see here. I think I may actually have a question for you, Dan, from one of our registrants. I think this is in regard to the Lalytics control panel. Can you briefly discuss the robot features below meta tags?
Oh, sure. Yeah, we'll be going into this in greater detail in future webinars, but let's take a quick look here at the advanced SEO area. So what the question is regarding is this robots, and so for the most part, if you don't know what these things are, the settings that it comes with are usually ideal. If you check this no index box, it means that it's telling Google and the other search engines not to index the page on the search engine. This can be useful if you have pages such as, like, if you've used the Lalytics form generator to do in-depth client intake forms or surveys or something like that. But you don't want people from the web stumbling upon them and filling them out to spam you. You may not want to index those pages, and so you simply click this. No follow means that they will not that you're telling Google not to follow the links that are on that page. No ODP means don't use results from the Open Directory project. This is kind of an anachronism, but we put it in there because, believe it or not, Google sometimes, at least as of recently, still pulled results from the old Open Directory project, which is this. So for those of you who have been on the web for a while, you might recognize this. It looks substantially similar to how it looked many, many years ago. This used to be kind of the gateway to get your site listed on the internet, and had an army of citizen editors who would curate the content. So you'd have to submit your site, you'd have to suggest it, and then it would get listed. And early on, a lot of the Google results pulled from this. And so just to give you an example, I had a website that had when I was practicing law in Seattle. And that website, once I moved and I opened up my practice in the Phoenix area, that website changed hands a couple times. It was repurposed for various things. And years later in Damas, the listing still existed, telling them about my practice in Seattle that hadn't been active for 10 years. And so this particular link or checkbox right here just says, if that listing exists and it's really only relevant to older sites, don't use whatever Damas says, ignore it, and look at the site and make your own determination. And then these no snippet, no archive, and no index image index, those are just telling Google not to archive it, and other search engines as well, in certain places. Really, if you if they're left unchecked, that's usually the best scenario. If you are a Lalytics member and we've imported your site, you very well may see that this is checked, the no ODP, and we do that for a reason, because there's very few, if any, cases where it benefits somebody from the website listing being pulled from Damas at this point. Let's see. I had a question that came in when Tori was giving her presentation, and the question is duplicating content from other sites versus duplicating from your own site. Is there a difference? Yes, there is. If you're duplicating content from another site, as Tori said, that's plagiarism. It's not adding anything to the online conversation about any given topic. It's simply just copying and stealing, for lack of a better way of putting it. If you are copying content from your own site, it doesn't really benefit you to have many iterations of a given page. It doesn't necessarily hurt you either, because Google will make a determination as to which page, if you've got pages that are identical, which page is the one that's the primary page, and there's other more complicated ways to direct its attention to the correct one. But if you're talking about copying contextual paragraphs, for example. So, for example, if you're talking about negligence law, and you have a page that goes through and talks about the elements of negligence, and then you go to the next page and you're talking, basically, very specific about what is the requirement for damages in a state or in certain circumstances, it may make sense to copy a paragraph from the general negligence discussion that talks about the elements to give a user who might come into that page having not traveled through the path that you want them to travel through in your website, but having come in through Google or a shared link or whatever, to give them context. That is perfectly acceptable. And really, when you look at what content you could duplicate from your site from one page to another, it really comes down to what the intention is. If the intention is to fool the search engines, don't do it. If the intention is to provide users with greater context, then by all means do it. It will likely help more than it could ever hurt. Okay, another question, and we'll have an advanced SEO seminar where we'll go over all the mechanics of this. But oh no, I'm sorry, I duplicated the question from before, so I've already answered that. Any other questions that anybody has? If you have them, please type them in. We will. Victoria, did you get any other questions?
I do not have any other questions at this time.
Okay. All right, great. Well, then we will go ahead and wrap up. Tori, do you want to speak briefly about what's going on in upcoming webinars?
Of course. So as a reminder, in our weekly Friday newsletter, we generally announce upcoming webinars. I believe we do not have I don't think we have any next week, but in the week prior, or in the week following that, rather, we have some other interesting webinars coming up. So if you're not already subscribed to our weekly Friday newsletter, recommend that you do that. You can find a entry for your email address at our blog, so that's blog.lalytics.com. If you scroll to the bottom of any of the blog posts, you'll see a place to enter your email address. Sign up there and we will keep you informed about all upcoming webinars and presentations, as well as giving you any supplementary materials or anything like that.
Great. Well, with that, thank you all for attending. This webinar will be available on demand shortly, and we'll announce it either in tomorrow's newsletter or in an email next week.